Hey, y'all. Have you ever been confused about why you feel successful in so many ways in your life? Like you've been able to accomplish a lot of things and you're a high achiever, but in other things, you just can't get your stuff together. You're like, I have tried hundreds, if not thousands of times and committed to myself over and over again. So why can I be so successful in some ways and then just can't figure it out in others? Let's talk about that today. Welcome to Beyond the Facade podcast. I'm your host, Luke Gordon, and I'm thrilled to have you join me in this space today. What we're going to be doing is diving deep into the trials and triumphs and truths of seeking authenticity. Becoming your true self isn't about a single action or moment. It's a relentless pursuit, a commitment to self that reveals the rich connection and meaning that our life has to offer. So whether this is your first time tuning in or you're a regular listener, know this: what you're building here goes beyond a conversation. You're here to challenge, to change, and to celebrate the incredible journey of becoming your authentic self. Because when you dare to show up fully, the rewards are immeasurable. So welcome to Beyond the Facade. Let's get started. Before we jump into this week's episode, I wanted to let you know about a 3-day intensive coming up with Choose Recovery Services. It's for men, and it's called Unmasked: Paths to Authentic Masculinity. This intensive is for men who are ready to embark on a transformative journey towards authenticity and self-discovery. This intensive is going to be held by Alana, Laura, and myself. Laura was on a previous podcast, and you probably know Alana. Hopefully you do. You get a chance to meet her. I'm just extremely excited for the men to get a chance to learn from these two ladies because they bring some great stuff to the table. So during these 3 days, we're going to explore the meaning of integrity. We're going to learn how to embrace the authentic self, the part that we're afraid if we're let seen, that bad things are going to happen. We're going to dive deeper than hopefully you ever have into family of origin. And we're going to heal some of those inner wounds and prepare a person to restore some relationships in their life. Because a lot of times what men say is I'm struggling with empathy. I'm struggling to really connect with my partner. And they say that I'm not really there present with them. And we're going to tackle that stuff. So if you're a man who's struggling, whether it's sexual compulsive behaviors or just conflicts with values or just struggling in those places relationally, we want you to come here and feel some hope. And we're going to lean into a lot of vulnerability. You're going to bring your life's challenges, and we're going to tackle those in some healthy ways and develop some self-compassion and some more tools. So it's going to be in Spanish Fork, Utah, September 18th to the 20th. Head over to chooserecoveryservices.com. We'll put a link to it in the notes, and go ahead and register or reach out to us and let us know what questions you have. Looking forward to having you. All right. So I wanted to start off by sharing with you a little bit of a personal story from my childhood. I grew up in southeastern Idaho, a little farm community. It's called Teton Valley. And my grandpa was a farmer. His dad was a farmer. And in southeastern Idaho, they do something when they farm, they do something called flood irrigation, which is they have ditches that go down through the fields. And instead of sprinklers that spray out in the fields with water to irrigate the crops, these ditches that go out through the fields, they'll dam them off and water will flood out into the field wherever they need it to go. And I was thinking about me as a little guy. I'd go help my grandpa or my dad or whoever it was, and we would go out there, turn the water loose, and then I would take my blue tarp, and it was attached to a 2x4, and the water would be going down this ditch, probably only like 2 or 3 feet of water, not very much. And I'd put my dam in the water with my tarp, and then I'd start to put dirt clods down the bottom to trap the tarp so the water would start to back up. And I remember the force of that water, me as a little guy, like almost pushed me over. And that intense pressure that existed just right there in that water for only 2 or 3 feet of water. And so it could flow out in other parts of the field. And I just think that serves as a powerful analogy for how our brains work and how we have well-worn pathways and how intentional effort is required to disrupt those well-worn pathways. And what's interesting is these neural pathways inside of our brain that are created. And just imagine that field for farming. water rushes down them, and water will follow the path of least resistance, and it will carve into the earth. We know this, worn pathway. And my job is to disrupt those pathways, dam them off. And by the way, when it comes to our brains, those neural pathways that are created, they don't go away. They always stay. So my job is to create a new well-worn pathway that is deeper and functions different. And that takes a long time. So that irrigation analogy is important to remember that these habits and routines, they don't just happen automatically. And it takes a lot of work. I wanted to tell you about the process of creating new routine. Just like water that floods a field, those routines, I'm going to refer to that word a lot. Those routines aren't going to be smooth. They're not going to be perfect. And it takes a lot of time and effort to establish those new paths. And I get frustrated that my new decision and my new goal doesn't come easily. It's like, man, I feel like I was convicted in this a few days ago. So why doesn't it seem like it's as useful for me anymore? Why am I forgetting why it matters so much? Because it takes a lot of time and effort to establish new rivers, new paths. But if we're persistent and eventually come, there's a new norm that happens, but it's with consistency. And often where someone can get hung up is the perfection piece. Okay, in order for me to create new, I have to be perfect at my new. No, we don't. That's not true. What we have to do is just create consistency and awareness of the new that we're trying to create. And I think of recently, one of the things that I tried to tackle was I'm like, I think what I'm going to do is I want to do better at eating. So I'm going to start to count calories because there's a bunch of cool technology. And I love a new app that has a new function. And I'm like, you can actually now with AI just speak into the app and say, I'm eating a Snickers bar, or I'm eating a banana, and it'll load stuff into you. I'm like, okay, now I can finally get to a place where I should be able to track this stuff. And what I noticed about creating something new for myself was my brain blocked a lot of that. And what I recognized is that I didn't have a foundation of something that would support me even tracking food. So what happens when it comes to creating new and creating new habits is that I have to have a foundation in place to support that. One of the things that our family loves more than anything is Disneyland. We love it so much. We're avid Disneyland people. And I learned this about Walt Disney. Walt Disney said when he was building Disneyland, he said, this park will never be completed. It'll never be finished. And I love that so much because when I think about creating goals is I don't have to find the right way the first time. I get a chance to go through and set a goal and learn about my experience in the process of learning to attain that goal. So it's important to me to be able to stay resilient in that process, which brings me to another person. So I just talked about Walt Disney. Now I want to talk about Thomas Edison, which I don't think there's actually any data on this, but Thomas Edison, I think over 1,000 times, over 1,000 attempts to invent the light bulb. What I find fascinating about that man is what type of a dialogue did he have with himself every time he failed and didn't learn? Like, what do you imagine he would have said to himself? And I don't know if he kicked his butt a lot in his mind and he said, you stupid idiot, look, you failed again. My guess is his failure, he probably didn't even view it that way. It was attempts to learn about himself. And I appreciate these two men of, hey, it's never completed. That's what Wall said. The other one, I don't know what he said, but I just know what he did, which is he learned from what he didn't get right. So I think as I work with men that are trying to overcome compulsive behavior, and there's so much frustration with trying 1,000 times, is more of the perfectionism. It's more of the, man, like I've tried so many times and I just haven't got it right yet. And I think about the goals and the routine that support, well, you'll talk about not looking at porn. It's not just like not looking at porn, but what's my routine underneath that keeps me from looking at porn? And have I figured that out? Have I figured what I need that routine to look like? Have I figured what my disciplines are underneath that? And do they support not looking at porn? The way I look at this is when it goes back to the Thomas Edison thing, he had a different relationship with failure than I think I used to have, which is, I'll call it my effed up relationship with failure. Like I just don't know how to fail at something. And I know there's this, what do they call it? Failing forward, which is kind of cliche. I don't know, maybe you've heard that a lot. And failing forward and I'm not failing, I'm learning. I'm having the process. So what I'm thinking about for the guys that are listening to this podcast is like, what does your routine look like? What have you learned about what you need in your life? And what are your goals that set yourself up for that? Because when we take a look and we listen and embrace the idea that disrupting those old patterns, those old rivers, it means I have to put something new in old behavior's pathway. I can't just take old behavior out. I have to put something new in its place. And I remember my therapist telling me at the very beginning of the journey, he were talking about those disciplines to begin that I needed. And he talked about certain things. He's talked about group, I think was the one he was talking about this time. He said, you know what, there's going to be things that come up like a birthday, your child's birthday, an anniversary. He gave me a couple more. I don't know why my mind's blanking. And he said, but you know what? You go to group first before you do anniversaries and birthdays and that kind of stuff. He's like, because you won't have those things anyway if you don't go to group because you won't stay sober. And I didn't forget that. And I hated it because there was a lot of things I missed out on. But I recognized that my routine mattered, group mattered, my meditation mattered, my time I woke up in the morning mattered, the sleep that I got mattered, the check-ins with accountability partner mattered, because those were all mini goals, routines that supported the bigger piece of it. And I had to learn what those look like because I can't just take another person's stuff and build that into my life. I have to figure out what it looks like for me. And that's the Disneyland part. That's the park will never be finished. I have to pull one thing in and see how it works to create the structure that replaces that old. One of the things I recognize is that this takes people outside of self to understand what this routine and what disciplines look like to achieving a goal. Because I don't want to say impossible because it's not impossible, but finding out what the new routine should look like and learning and understanding that involves other people. So I recommend that as you build this, that you involve other people, that you don't do it on your own, that you take a look at different aspects in the journey from other people's experience, especially people that have already gone through it. Somebody that's already gone through and achieved something that you want to achieve. So they come help you with those routines. I remember back in the day, people used to call them dailies. They're like, hey, Luke, there's nothing else that matters besides your dailies. And I had like 6 of them that I would accomplish on a daily basis. And that had to become the most important thing. So when I went to set those up, I used support to make sure I had the right ones in place, and then they evolved over time. So my encouragement is, my invitation, I guess I should say, is don't do that on yourself. Grab a notepad, write down what you think it would be, then get with somebody to just process through those and think about those. And then I just want to encourage you to remember and reflect on that true change takes a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of resilience. You're redirecting your own mental pathways. It's evolving your routines. There's going to be setbacks. There's going to be learning, and the journey is ongoing and it's really valuable. So just want to encourage you to keep moving forward, embracing the process of celebrating change itself and the progress you make along the way. And it's not about celebrating the end goal. It's about celebrating those moments in between. And please make sure you're celebrating with the right people. It is painful when men want their person they hurt to celebrate those wins, when really those wins should be celebrated, but they're celebrated in a way where the partner's just hurt because they feel like there should have been something different all along. So celebrate in the right places. All right. Thank you, everybody. Hey, thanks for joining us today. If this is something that you connected with, I'd love to meet with you more and talk about it. So what you can do is go to chooserecoveryservices.com or check the show notes. And there, what we can do is set up a quick conversation to meet. Thanks so much for listening to Beyond the Facade, where we unmask the authentic self.